It's here! This is my 100th LitReel, episode 100, the big 100. Okay, so I'm going to get some fancy graphics and maybe some sound effects. If we can figure out how to do all that before I post. Yes, this is the 100th time I have stood in front of this door and rambled on about writing or teaching or stories or language, and for some reason, you guys are watching it. So who's the real sucker here? And as this is episode number 100, my production department asked if I was going to do anything special for this reel. But the thing is, I wasn't really sure what would be an appropriate topic for such a momentous occasion. So I went to social media and I asked people what they thought episode 100 should be about. I got a lot of good suggestions, and several of them have made the list for future episodes. But for this one, the comment I got most often was something like this one, submitted by Ember. Ember asked, what's one of the stories that made you start to love reading? Ember, by the way, if this is the same Ember who was in my class a couple of years ago, hey, great, good to hear from you. But Ember, that is an excellent question. I guess in 100 episodes, I've never actually done an origin story for me before, so seems like an appropriate time. It's hard to pinpoint an exact book that pulled me in. Honestly, I don't remember a time where I didn't love reading. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and we grew up in a house full of books. She read to me, my grandmother read to me. It was just part of life. I do remember at an early age becoming a big fan of Donald J. Sobel's Encyclopedia Brown series. I mean, it's a kid detective who outsmarts all the adults in town. What's not to like? Mom and Dad must have interpreted this as a general love for mysteries, because then they went out and got me a huge collection of the old Hardy Boys books. By the way, for those of you still waiting for my video on the Stratemeyer Syndicate, it is on the list. Then there was the real kicker. My dad came home from work one day with a box of Archie comic books. Somebody he worked with had a kid who didn't want them anymore, and they passed them over to me. I devoured them. And pretty soon I was using what little money a kid in the 80s had to start buying more comic books. From Archie, I graduated to a character that I was used to seeing on TV's The Electric Company. You may have heard of him, a guy with sticky hands and big eyes called Spider-Man. Then when my Uncle Todd found out I'd started reading comic books, he gave me some of his old ones, specifically comics starring Green Lantern and the Legion of Superheroes. Okay, we're about at the top of that first hill on the roller coaster, so make sure you're bolted in, because from here it's going to go everywhere. Because you see, the thing that people who disparage comic books don't realize is that comics are not just some bland, homogeneous lump of power fantasies. No, comic books exist in every genre, in every tone, every kind of storytelling you can imagine. There is a comic book that fits it. The average comic book has a more complex vocabulary than most adult novels. And after reading those for a while, here's what happened next. Green Lantern and the Legion are both science fiction comics, and concepts I read there got me into other science fiction writers, guys like Ray Bradbury, Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and my personal favorite of the old masters, Isaac Asimov. Now, while Asimov may have been best known for writing science fiction, he wrote dozens of other books about other topics. He wrote mysteries, he wrote science textbooks, he wrote analyses of the Bible, he wrote 2 joke books, and I read anything of his that I could get my hands on. Then, as it does to many of us, 5th grade happened. In 5th grade, I was placed in one of those small group gifted classes for part of the day. You know the ones I'm talking about, where they take the kids who have high test scores and put them in a room where they talk about all their potential so that they can grow up and have crippling anxiety and imposter syndrome. It's not the teacher's fault, it's the system. Now, in that class, we were assigned a group project, a round-robin story, where each person would write part of a story and then pass it on to the next person, and that person would continue and pass it on to the next one, and so on down the line. Whenever we did this project, my section of the story would be full of things like monsters and magic and superheroes and that sort of thing. But then I would pass it on to the next person, and invariably, they would immediately jettison all of those concepts and turn into something like a tea party. This is where I first realized 2 very important things. First, I've been reading stories all of my life, and I had a vague awareness that there were people writing them, but it never occurred to me that this was something that I could do. The second and most important thing I realized was that if anybody was going to screw up my stories, it should be me. And so I started writing. My first novel-length project was in high school, and was actually, it was Star Trek fan fiction. And no, I no longer have a copy of it. I sincerely hope. So then I was reading, and then I was writing, but it wasn't over yet. Then the next step happened in college, when my friend Marcus Smith dragged me kicking and screaming to audition for the drama department's spring production of The Importance of Being Earnest. I had never been in a play before. I didn't really want to be in a play, but I kind of got coerced into it. And fortunately, I got the role of the butler, which seemed fairly safe. But after just a couple of days of rehearsals, one of the actors quit Parts got shuffled around, and the next thing I knew, I was playing Algernon Moncrief, who was the deuteragonist. Go back and find that video. You'll understand why that matters. Despite having way more responsibilities in this play than I had wanted or expected, I loved it. And then I fell in love with theater. A few years and several plays later, I wound up in a production of what to this day remains my favorite show I have ever done, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged. 3 actors trying to condense all 37 of Shakespeare's plays into a 90-minute production. It's as insane as it sounds. It's crazy, it's off the walls, it's off the rails, but it's also the most fun I ever had as an actor. Not only that, but it ignited my love for Shakespeare. I had read Shakespeare in school, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, King Lear, but it wasn't until I was performing Shakespeare that I really discovered what Shakespeare should be, which is fun. His plays aren't some grand paragons that should be put up on a pedestal somewhere. No. His plays are entertainment, and entertainment should be fun not just to watch or to read, but to participate in. I'd understood the earlier plays, but it wasn't until I performed in this wild, wacky farce, which Billy Shakes would 100% have approved of, by the way, that I really grew an appreciation for it. They're stories, just like any other story, and if you're gonna do it, you should do it in a way that's enjoyable. I still use that philosophy in my class every time I teach a Shakespeare play. And honestly, that's also the mindset I try to bring to these reels. Yeah, sometimes I talk about more serious stuff, and yes, I can be a little bit pedantic, but stories should be fun. Language is a toy to be played with. What I'm here trying to do more than anything is show you how to play with those toys. But ultimately, what you do with those toys, that's up to you. So, Eddie, that's 100 reels, right? What should people do to celebrate?
Buy your book!
I would never say such a thing, but you gonna argue with him?